Hello, I'm going to be making a similar chair to this, although not quite so elegant, but I'm going to make it my own. Now, a little background on this is the Fiddleback Windsor chair is a variation on an English chair, Windsor chair. And these colonial chairs evolved from the earlier banister back chair in New England, and it employed a back splat and uprights that were fused into this splat later on, which gives it the name fiddleback. And it came about, around the 1750s in the south part of New England, and merged the English Windsor chair with the more decorative taste of the New Englanders. It also made its way into other parts of Europe, and it is kind of hard to say if it actually originated here, but it does appear to have shown up here first in homemade chairs that were made by homesteaders, and then a little bit later by people who were professional woodworkers. And I'm using balsa wood for this. I'm using the materials that I have. I'm not going to employ any plastics. And I'm just going to be using 1/8 inch balsa wood for the seat, the arms, and actually the hoop back. And I'll be carving them a bit. And so they're going to be a little bit heavier than you would see in the finer work that people did at that time. And I'm going to be using bamboo skewers as the spokes or the spindles, or the uprights, they're mostly called. And that's about it. So just a couple of different types of materials in this one. And this was a very tricky build for me. I'd never built anything like this. And now I'm working on why it is called a fiddleback. I'm making that back splat. The only thing I'm not going to do with this back splat is I'm going to leave it solid. Most of them would have carvings, but not all of them. I did see a few that I looked at that had a solid back splat. And this is where the name fiddleback comes from, because in some cases they actually do kind of look like a fiddle. The way that they're carved, there's usually some carvings in them to make them more decorative. But mine's not going to have that, because I did try to do it with the first piece that I cut out. You don't see that here. And the wood was too soft, so I decided that I would just leave it a solid. Since I'm not that experienced in doing this sort of thing, I thought I'd make it easier on myself. So now I'm just going to cut around and try to make the cuts so that it doesn't break in half. Now lengthwise, I cut this thing lengthwise so that the grain would go lengthwise, and so when I would go in and cut the decorative part, it wouldn't break off. And that did seem to work really well. So I'm just going around. By the way, I use a very heavy X-Acto blade. I don't use cheap blades. I found, at least for me, that the cheap blades break very easily and it's very unsafe. So I spend a little bit extra and I buy the number 2 X-Acto blades. And I've never had one break yet. And they stay sharp longer too, at least in my experience. So I'm using rather a large blade here, and it's brand new, it's sharp, and I'm just going around the decorative part. I'm going to give it my best shot here to get it to be a mirror image of the other side, but I'll probably have to sand it into shape when I'm done with this to make it at least so it doesn't look too wonky. And yes, this was a trial, but I'm glad I made it. Now that I've done it once, I think I'm going to be able to make some dining room chairs, not with arms on them, and maybe not with the back splat, but make Windsor chairs for the dining area in the kitchen for my log home. I'm hoping to be able to make a video soon of how I'm making the logs, and that should be out in the next couple of weeks. I've had some delays because of gardening, and this time of year is really busy for us with with that sort of thing. So it could be a little longer than a couple of weeks. We have to get our gardens in. I know many of you out there garden too, and you know how it is. And we live in the north, and so we need to get our gardens in after the frosts are all gone. And that usually happens at the end of May. And this is the arms that I'm making right now. They're just a little bit bigger than the back hoop. A little wider. And again, I think I mentioned it, but I'll mention it again. This is 1/8 inch thick balsa wood. And I had to look through my stash of leftovers to make sure I got a nice clear piece. It didn't have too many imperfections in it. And I have speeded this film up, so this isn't going quite this fast in reality. I don't cut wood this quickly. It does take me a while. I think the total number of hours I put into this was actually almost 10 hours, just because I had to figure out what to do. It was very intimidating for me, but I got over it. I realized that if I made mistakes, I could just start over. And now I'm making the seat. And I always work from a photograph. I don't have plans. I look at the photograph, and then I look at the scale, and then I just go from there. And I know many people don't work that way. We all work differently. So I hope this helps you if you do decide to make a chair like this, to at least give you some knowledge on how I did it and how it could be done. I'm sure there are people who can do a much better job than I did. In fact, I know there are. And it would be better if you used hardwood, if you have the means to do that. I didn't want to bend any wood, and I didn't have wood that could be bent by, heating it up, maybe in hot water or whatever. So I'm actually just carving it into these curves so that I don't have to do that, so I don't have to bend it too much. But if you did have hardwood, I think you could carve the decorative slices out of the fiddleback, the splat, and make it a little more interesting, as you saw in that original picture. I'm just going with my little diamond rasps around and filing out anything that shouldn't be there. And that did take quite a bit of time, actually. I had to keep looking at each side to make sure I tried to get it at least the same. And sometimes on balsa wood you go a little too far, and then you've got to change it on the other side again. So the story in my log home, again, are people that have built a log home, and it's one of those homes that is a 2-story log home that's going to have plaster on the inside. Later, a lot of these houses where the clapboard was put on the outside during the early part of the 19th century and right into the 1900s to cover the logs, because they were kind of considered too primitive, and that's kind of a shame, but they do still find log homes. There was one found recently in Ohio. They didn't know it was a log home, and when they took off the clapboard, they found a log home underneath it. But there'd been quite a bit of plaster put on the inside, horsehair plaster, and they left that. But sometime I'll look up the pictures for that and show that to you. And I know in New England they have in the past found some like that. Many of you may know about those, probably more than I do. Now I'm going to cut that in half, well, not quite in half, but later on, and you'll see why I do that. Now I'm just going to go around and clean up these pieces a little bit and make sure they're even. And I did a little trimming on that one. And now I'm going to see what I need to do. I just cut that splat. You see the piece off there to the upper left. Just going to see what I need to do as far as putting in the uprights. And these are just wooden skewers. These are toothpicks actually, but I decided not to use them, but I put them in just to see the size and ended up using bamboo skewers that were a little heavier. And then I carved each one. I wanted it to have a little bit more of a hand-worked look instead of having smooth uprights. And I will cut those points off too. Not right down, but I'll leave a little bit of the tapering at the end. Just because in the pictures that I look at, it looks like they leave some tapering. Okay, I'm just going to go around this and trim it up a little bit. This is the back hoop. I don't recommend that you carve the way I do unless you're very used to carving. You should carve away from yourself if you're unsure of what you're doing so you don't cut your fingers. I've glued that back splat on with some wood glue. And it actually stuck a little piece of metal in it too, all the way through. You can't see it. Just to keep it so it doesn't just snap off. Okay, I sanded those, and now I'm going to work on putting the uprights in. And this was very tricky. I had a hard time with this, but it did work out. I don't think you're going to say when you see it finished that, oh, look, a professional made this. That's not going to happen here, but I did the best I could, and I want to show it to you. So I think the next one will be a lot better. Now, you've really got to use a drill for this. You can't just poke a hole in it. It'll just break the wood. So I have a micro drill here with the largest drill I have for this particular micro drill. And it's exactly the same size as the skewers, so I should be able to push those through. And I have to trim the bottoms a little bit, taper them off on that hoop. I had to go to another size because I had trimmed them down so far that it actually made them quite a bit smaller. So this is the size down. And just going to push that through just to make sure all the bits and pieces that are inside there shavings will come out. When I was done, I had shavings all over my sweater. I stood up, I took them through the house with me and ended up having to spend a bunch of time sweeping them. So I should have taken my sweater off, but I wasn't thinking. Okay, I'm just going to push those through. And then I'll measure from there. And I will clip off those points on the top with a pair of very sharp wire clippers. But I'm just trying to gauge where they have to go. There, I clipped them, and now I'm just sanding them. Now the two that are on the right and the left that are going away from the splat have to be angled. And those are holes for the hoop. And that had to be a bigger hole, so I'm using super glue to push those in. And I'm going to glue the splat and the hoop in first, and then I took the spoke, the uprights out, and now I'm doing them one at a time. And you see I angled those, the ones that are on the right and left. Those had to be angled to fit into the hoop. And now I can put the others in, and I'm just going to glue them. I'm not putting them into the wood. I'm just getting them flush, pushing them all the way in. And I'm using Ultra Gel super glue, and this should hold just fine. I wanted it to stick right away, because if it didn't, I was going to run into trouble having them slide around, and I didn't want that to happen. Okay. Now I'm going to measure for the bottom, the seat, and I want it to be the same height as the chair I made in the other video, which is the wingback wooden chair. These will go in the same room, and I want them to be to scale and the same height. I'm going to clip these off, but there will be some coming out the bottom, and I'll clip those off later. So I'm just going to mark the holes where they need to go now. This does have some give to it, so you can kind of estimate and then push them around the corner of the seat. And then another piece of that splat will go in between those uprights. I have to cut that off because it ends up being a little bit too big, and that's just fine. I made allowance for that right in the beginning, so just putting some super glue on it, and I'm just going to stick that on. Now later I do put more glue on it with a more liquid form of super glue. And I'm not concerned about getting glue on the wood because I don't use stain. And you won't see any glue when this is finished. Now there are more spokes that have to go in. I keep calling them spokes, but they're called uprights. And I'm going to drill the holes, and I can't drill them all the way through on this. I have to just go about halfway. And I'll measure for those. I just got to put a little more glue in there because it didn't stick. But I will drill the holes for these uprights that are angled all the way through the chair. Now the mistake that I made with this chair is I didn't make it so that it would lean back enough. It's more straight. But the next one I make, I will probably try to make a hardwood seat so that I can do that. I tried to angle it and it just wouldn't do it. The wood's too soft, it just kept going upright. But you'll see what I mean later. Okay, I just glued those in, and I just had to get them the same length as the others so that I can push them right through the chair and then cut them off the bottom. Now the chair, I did file it down so that there's a indentation for each leg, but you can't quite see it. But you'll see it at the end. So I'll just drill all these holes right through. And I'm using the same size drill I did for the upper part of the arms, which isn't the largest drill, it's the second to the largest. And I'm just going to clean out the shavings. And now I'm going to go around. This was kind of tricky, and I'm going to push it through till it's even. And I have to push it down all the way so that that splat is flush with the seat. And then I did put some glue in it there. You didn't see me put the glue in, but I will put some more in just so you could see. Okay. Now the liquid stuff, I'm just putting it right in all the way around, and it's just soaking right into the wood just to make sure this thing doesn't come apart. Okay, now I have to work on the legs. Well, not the legs yet. There's two more spindles that have to go in on the front, and these get angled very much to the back of the seat. So these are those chair rails or actually stair rails, and I end up carving them to make them look quite a bit different. I have to carve the ends so that they're approximately the same size as the drill that I have. And I will drill a half hole in the arms and then an angled hole in the seat all the way through. Now there's a spindle you can see up in the top there. That's going to be a crossbar between the four legs. And then you'll see that later. I carved that ahead of time. I'm just putting the holes in where I need to drill. And first I'll cut these off. I'll sand them too. So I'm just going to drill it on an angle on both sides. And then in the top, right where the hands go to rest. And there, I'll just pop that in. And this is the other decorative piece there to go in. And I glued them, and those are in now. It's pretty stable. It's surprisingly strong for what it is. I have to drill that hole a little bit more. It just didn't look right. And I'll put that liquid super glue on. That will just fuse right into the wood. And give it another quick sand here and there. Okay, now the legs have to go on. And I have that spindle up at the top. That will be the connecting spindle. And I want to make sure I get these legs so that it sits at the same height. So the front legs will have some decorative element to them, but not quite as much as perhaps the other chairs. I have to make sure I get just enough leeway in there so if I make a mistake I can just clip it down. So I'll make them a little longer, and then I will carve the ends. These are going to go on the floor, and then this will go into the top of the chair. This is going on the floor. I'm sorry, I have it backwards. That will go onto the floor when I'm carving right now. And I just carved them down a little bit. I didn't make it too thin. And I'm cutting off the top, and then I'll sand those so that they're flush. But I'm carving those as well. And then I'll sand them a little bit. So that will go on the front. I'm just pushing a hole in where it needs to go, and then I'll drill another hole. I thought it would work like that. It did. I actually drilled one hole, and then I actually went through the chair. You can see when I drilled it, but I sanded it down enough so you can't see it afterwards. And now I have to do the back legs. The back legs have to be angled back, and that's the spindle that will go between those legs that will hook to the other supports. So it has a bit of a decorative feature. And these have to be angled backwards. So I'll just cut those, and then I'll fit them on I have to shave down the feet a little bit. So in the end, they didn't look like banister rails anymore. I'll still have to clip that off a bit. I'll sand them down. I'm just using an emery board. I did use wood glue to glue these back legs on, and I put pins through the top to stabilize it. I had to give that one a quick sand. But there's just a little bit of wood glue on it. And I did the exact same for the other leg. So now the back legs are on and the front legs. And then I put on the two sides of the support and the spindle in the middle. And so that was very easy, actually. I didn't lose the film. I actually stopped filming and didn't turn the camera back on, and that's why I can't show you putting those two supports in with the spindle in the middle that holds the legs together on the bottom. But it's kind of self-explanatory. It's just a matter of lining it up, and that's it. There's no decorative element to the spindle on the right and the left on the bottom of the chair connecting the legs, and I just hand carved the middle one, and you saw that with the red arrow earlier. So I will show you in a still in a moment so that you can see it. There it is. That's just what I did. So there's two on the right, on the left, and then just that decorative spindle bracing those other two together. So sorry about that. It happens. Happens to me a lot, actually. So I just went around and sanded it again. And I'm going to brush this off, and I'm going to give it the first layer of paint. And I'm just going to use paint that I've mixed for other things that I've kept aside and use that up after I'm done sanding. And this is 600 grit paper, and I finished sanded it with 1000 grit. And this is left over from one of my other projects, and so I'm going to use it. It's more of a walnut color. So this is just a mixture of a little bit of wood glue and some maroon and burnt umber. And I'll just go over the whole thing, and then I will, when it dries, I'll sand it again. And the good thing about this is if you spill glue, it isn't going to show. And I like that because I like to use enough glue to hold these things together and make them look solid. I don't leave globs of glue, though. I always wipe those away. It's a little bit of a cheat. But hey, why not? If it makes it easier. Often when you buy doll furniture, factory doll furniture, there'll be blobs of glue here and there. You can always chisel them off and touch the paint up, though. And you see again on the bottom how I put those spindles together. The two on the side aren't decorative, but the one in the middle is, which I saw quite a bit of. Most of them were styled that way. I'm looking forward to making a simpler version of this chair without the fiddleback on it for the dining room. Now that I've made this one, I'm not as afraid. And I'll need 4 chairs for my dining room table, the trestle table that I made earlier. This looks quite dark, but I am going to sand it. I am going to put wear marks on this one. They won't be terribly pronounced, but there will be wear and tear. There, okay. I'll just let that dry. I gave it a sanding. And I'm actually using a file to do this, the diamond file, the rasp. Taking quite a bit of paint off around the edges. And I'll do it on the seat and around where people would kick it with their shoes, and on the front of the seat, and on the back. And I'll sand it again too. This required a lot of sanding. And even when it was done, I felt I could have sanded it more. So I think the next ones I will spend more time. Now I'm going to put some gel stain on it, and this is the oak. I got the idea from Log Cabin Crafts. She has a really wonderful site. I'll leave a link to her site in the bio. She has a lot of really good ideas. And she makes miniatures too, and she does a lot of stuff actually. And she's a lovely person. So I'll leave a link. She used this on some crockery, and it looked great. Okay, now I'm going to make the seat. I'm going to let that dry, the chair, and I will sand it again. And this is just some scrap fabric that I had, and it's woven, just some gingham. And I'm going to put that trim around it with the blue and white cord, blue thread, and I have some silk thread here, red. I like to use silk thread. It's very strong and it pulls through the fabric so smoothly. It just makes it easier to do a back stitch all the way around. And if you don't know what a back stitch is you put in a running stitch and then you go back through the middle of the first stitch and then pull it through with another running stitch so that it can't unravel, or it can't do it easily. And I'm just going to go around the whole thing and just leave the open back. And I stuffed it with wool. I turned it inside out, stuffed it with wool. And now I'm going to sew the trim around the edge with this blue cord. This actually came off of something I bought. It had like this string wrapped around it. And I said, gee, that's kind of pretty. I'm going to save that. And that was several years ago, so I'm using it now. It just seemed perfect, red, white, and blue. Okay. This is just cotton thread that I'm using here. I didn't have the right color of silk thread, so I didn't want to use white. I did wax this thread. I always wax the thread when I use it. It just makes it easier, makes it stronger. My husband was a beekeeper for quite a few years, and we have a lot of wax left over and honey. But we stopped keeping bees because I'm very allergic to the stings, and the bees were getting quite aggressive and chasing me all over, so he said, well, that's it. You can't afford to get stung, so I'm really allergic. So we have no more bees. Okay, that pillow's done. I did put a tuft in the middle, but you won't see that till the end. Now I'm actually putting a combination of burnt sienna mixed with half wood glue. And I'm just giving it the once over. It's very watered down. And it is matte paint. Just make sure those legs are steady. And I'll try that seat on there. Okay, there it is. I just have to put the tuft in the middle of the seat. And that's done. And I'll compare it to the size of the wing chair that I made. And that's great. It turned out pretty well, and I think that it's just about the same size. So one's going to be for the husband and one's going to be for the wife, and we'll toss a coin to see who gets what chair. And there it is finished, and I put the tuft in the middle. Well, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up and subscribe. Bye-bye.